everyone, and welcome back to another episode of What the Forensics. My name is Nicole, and I am joined here again by the lovely Journey and Rebecca. Today is very exciting. We have a special guest joining us. Ellie Hayes will be joining us. She used to be a animal cruelty officer, so she's graciously said that she will come join and kind of tell us a little bit about her role, her time there, and all of that fun, not fun stuff. Before we jump into it, though, remember to leave us reviews and or comments. We do like to read them. Like, subscribe, and follow us wherever you can. This helps us grow and reach more people. And that, while not really applicable in this case, but with others, remember that while we do try our best to research, we can make mistakes and we're still actively learning. So we hope you enjoy learning with us. As a blanket, listener's discretion, I will say animal abuse, animal cruelty, given Ellie's title as an animal cruelty officer. So kind of anything under that umbrella will probably be discussed in this episode. So if it's a bit much, either put it on pause. We'll provide some resources and stuff. But that being said, all doom and gloom. Welcome, Ellie. How are
Thank
you?
you. Good, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Of course. Thank you for saying yes. It was really nice kind of to be able to say, hey, do you want to do this? And you're like, absolutely. So it's nice to finally have you on the episode. I know we've been kind of chatting about it for a little bit. So glad to have you here. We'll do a little hurrah, hurrah.
Yeah, I don't want to say I'm excited because it's obviously not a great topic, but I am excited to shed light on some of the things that animal cruelty officers go through and public
Mhm.
perception and those kind of things.
I think I'm looking forward to it most too because I honestly had never heard of the position before and just didn't really think it existed.
Mhm.
So I don't know much beyond what we've kind of briefly chatted about. So I'm really looking forward to kind of shed light on this role and that there are people in communities, at least across Canada, I assume globally, that
Mhm.
dedicate their time and volunteer their time to do this role and save animals and whatnot. So that I'm looking forward to, I
Yeah.
guess.
I agree. It's also been cool, like just the little bit that we've talked before. Like, I had no idea that an animal cruelty officer has the ability to arrest someone.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that it is actually like a form of law enforcement.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that obviously depends. That's province to province, or I guess in America, state by state, but I can definitely get into that in my experience with that too.
Yeah. I guess like to kind of segue off of that, do you want to just tell us briefly, kind of sparks notes what the role is, at least what the capacity you were in that role, and kind of like how you got to that position and your time there, I
Yeah.
guess.
So like I said, it's going to depend province by province and state by state. In Canada, each province has their own way to, I guess, enforce animal cruelty laws. So, for example, in Ontario, they have the Ontario SPCA, where their ability to enforce animal law is different than, let's say, Nova Scotia, where they have the Nova Scotia SPCA. Different provinces have different branches of various SPCAs, which are all regulated under, I guess, one umbrella.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure, and I could be wrong on this, that Ontario's SPCA powers just got changed recently within the last couple of years.
Hmm.
But I know Nova Scotia, they enforce under the Animal Protection Act. So I guess what the duties of an officer is to enforce that law. But yeah, so the Nova Scotia SPCA gets contracted out by the Department of Agriculture, which is a government
Oh.
organization, to enforce the Animal Protection Act. So that's one of the common misconceptions is the animal cruelty officers aren't a government organization and they often are working for a nonprofit. So the Nova Scotia SPCA is a nonprofit that gets paid by the province to enforce the act. The act is available online that anybody can look it up, but those are the Nova Scotia's standards for dealing with animals. It's by book, it's called An Animal in Distress.
Hmm.
So that's what you're going out and preventing and I guess enforcing is to ensure that animals aren't in distress.
So in that position though, like when you say animals are in distress, do you get calls throughout your day to day then and then you act on those, or do you kind of have a system, at least in your previous role? Because I, like you said, it looks like it differs province to province, but
Yeah. Yeah, that is very much the way that we got cases was through public calling in
okay.
cases. So I
Oh.
would say it was about 90% public referral. You'd occasionally get police referral, but because the police can enforce the Animal
Right.
Protection Act, or they can also act under the criminal code, it wasn't too often that the police would call us. It was more so the police would call us if, let's say, they were doing a warrant and there was an animal in distress, or an animal was locked in a car and they needed us to come get the car or whatnot. But that
Okay.
line can kind of blur sometimes between what is animal cruelty and what is more so a bylaw matter. So yeah, so
Hmm.
anyone in the public can call their local line, I guess, for example, in Ontario, BC, Alberta, Nova Scotia, it would be the SPCA versus other provinces might have local police jurisdictions that deal with those things. But anyone that has a public concern can call in, and that's how we would get our cases. And then we would triage our cases based off what needed to be triaged. So, for example, if you have a great if you have a like what are those big white dogs called? A mal?
Pyrenees?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah. So if you have a Pyrenees that someone is saying is left outside for 24/7, 24/7, and it's fall, midwinter time, that might not be as much of a concern or a priority as someone who's saying that there's a chihuahua that's left outside 24/7, mid fall, midwinter. You're kind of basing your calls and your triage off of your background and your knowledge of animals and what those animals might need in specific situations.
Hmm.
right. That makes
Interesting.
sense.
So then, like going into that with your background of and knowledge of animals, did you? How do you get into a position like that? Is because I know you had mentioned that it's all kind of. Well, this may have been before we started recording, but like it's very much volunteer based and non for profit based. So, is it volunteers that are coming in with a background in like vet sciences, with any previous hands on experience with animals, or a combination of it all?
Yeah, even though the SPCA is nonprofit, we were paid. So we were
Okay.
fully paid officers.
Okay.
And I guess the background's not too specific. I had a background in animal care. So I had worked at an emergency animal hospital during school. And so I had that. And then I also had a criminal justice background from my school. So those two things kind of combined.
Hmm.
But from my experience, anybody with an animal background that was willing to learn about the criminal justice side of it, they were willing to hire, and vice versa. Anyone with a criminal justice background that had the interest in the animal side of it, they were willing to hire. It wasn't too stringent on, I guess, qualifications
Yeah,
and those kind of things. As long as you were willing to learn and had that appetite to learn,
that's kind
it
of
was a
nice.
job that you could pick up in the field, I guess, per se.
Yeah,
That's
right.
really cool. There's not a lot of jobs like that I feel like that is the situation. So if someone actually is interested in that, that seems like a super cool, I mean, full career in general, but also it seems like it would be a cool kind of stepping stone to get further into
100%.
it.
That's always what I looked at it as too, was it was a huge stepping stone, and there was a lot to learn as a stepping stone, but what a great environment to learn those kind of things in.
Hmm. Would you say it's a difficult first position though? Because I can imagine if you're like you're out in the field for most of your job too, are you not?
Yeah,
So would you say it's almost alarming with some of the things that you come across if it was your first job in this position?
you definitely need to have the right personality for it and the right mindset for it. I came across people who looked at it as just a job and
Hmm.
failed at it because it was just a job, or
Mm.
people who were too emotionally involved in it and couldn't handle
Yeah.
the two sides of it. I was kind of lucky where in my first job that I had at the animal hospital, because it was an emergency animal hospital, I saw a lot of things at a very young age that kind of, I guess, without knowing, prepared me for what I would see in that role. And I learned from a young age that I could deal with it and it didn't
Yeah.
bother me, versus other people might not have that experience. So I think it depends, like, to answer your question on if it's a difficult role as a first time job, it just depends on your personality more so, and
Right.
how you deal with trauma in a sense, and how you deal with difficult emotions, and how you deal with people. Because you have to know, on top of dealing with your own emotions and your own reactions, you also have to deal with other people's reactions and other people's emotions. And as you can imagine, if someone's abusing an animal, they're not always the nicest person
Mhm.
Yep.
and not always
Yeah.
the most mentally sound in that element. So knowing how to, I guess, perceive people's mental states and
Yeah.
remove your emotions from what you're dealing with is the biggest benefit to working that job.
Yeah.
Oh, that makes
Yeah.
sense. I had heard you earlier too. You had mentioned like search warrants, and this was more so in terms of, police may be executing a search warrant. They come across a car with a dog in it. You would look into that. Um, you as in your role execute your own search warrants, and then how would that work, and how does that differ from, say, a law enforcement search warrant and one handed out by an animal cruelty officer?
Yeah, we actually did search warrants all the time. So in as you guys are aware, in criminal law, you have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt, and it's no different from enforcing the Animal Protection Act. And oftentimes when you go into a situation, you seize an animal because they fall under that element of distress, and you have a person can appeal that decision, and they have 7 days to do that. And if they decide to appeal, you have to go to, it's essentially an appeal court where you're going up against them to say, is was this seizure lawful? It doesn't have anything to do with someone's emotions,
Hmm.
what someone thinks is right. It's, was this seizure lawful under whatever act you seized them under? So while you're, after you've seized an animal, or I guess before you seize an animal, you're always going into that mindset of beyond a reasonable doubt. I have to be able to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that, one, my seizure was lawful, and two, I can charge this person. So to get to the point of doing a search warrant, it's typically either, it can be either and or. You're going in with the intent to seize an animal that someone isn't willing to give you, which I know
Hmm.
that sounds odd that someone might be willing to give you an animal to seize, but it does happen.
Hmm.
Or you're going in with the sense that I need to collect evidence.
Hmm.
Most of the
Right.
time, you're getting that search warrant because you know there's an animal inside that's in distress. So to get that search warrant, you have to produce an uh, it's called an ITO, an information to obtain, to the court. And what that is you hand that to the judge, and the judge reads it point A to point B and makes their decision off of that ITO if you have enough evidence to breach that person's charter of rights and freedoms to enter their home without their permission. And if
Wow.
you can prove that, then you get that search warrant and you can go into the house. Oftentimes, when you're seizing an animal because you believe to be there in distress, it needs to be immediate and quick.
Yeah.
Because if an animal's in distress, that means that they're dying, because that's the definition of distress, not by dictionary that, but
Yeah.
essentially
Yeah.
distress means they're in danger.
Yeah.
So you have to prove to a judge in relatively quick terms, like, why this animal can't survive without you going into the house, what's making them in distress, XYZ, to be able to knock their, essentially, you're given permission to knock their door in, knock their window in, whatever it means that you need to get into that house. You can get into that house with that search warrant. It's the same search warrant that a police would use. We're just
Hmm.
for a different means.
Right.
So that's why we
Interesting.
would, pardon?
Oh, sorry. I just said that's interesting.
Yeah, so that's why we would obtain search warrants, is
Yeah.
go in. There was only a couple times where I can't remember if I ever did this, but I know fellow officers would do this, would get a search warrant to obtain evidence in a crime.
Okay.
I can't speak on that because I can't remember if I ever did that. I don't think I did ever did that, but I do have some pretty wicked search warrant stories if you want to hear one of those.
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
please.
Yes.
Well, I'll
Yeah.
exclude names and I'll exclude locations just to keep it. All this information's public anyways, but just to not bring light on situations that are done with essentially. So we had a referral from a local animal hospital saying that an individual had brought in a lost dog who was super malnourished and not doing well. So we had gone to pick up this dog, and in the meantime, that local animal hospital had microchipped the dog, found the owner, realized the dog had been registered to to a local animal rescue. They had called that animal rescue, and this was all in between the time of their initial call and us driving to the animal hospital, which was maybe 30 minutes. They had
Wow.
called that local animal rescue, and the animal rescue had given them the name of the individual who was in charge of this dog, which happened to be the same person who dropped the dog off. So the
Oh.
story kind of started in this weird space where this person had dropped this super malnourished dog off, claiming it was a lost dog. And in that 30 minutes, that local animal hospital had done their own research and brought the owner back to the person who had dropped the dog off. So
Mhm.
before we even got there, we already knew that this was going to be bigger than it initially seemed. So we seized the dog from the animal hospital. Obviously, when we weren't seizing the dog from them, but for legality reasons, we had to seize the dog because we can't just take someone's dog. And
Yeah.
we had given them the seizure notice and said, if the owner comes back within these 7 days, just give them this notice. This is how they appeal our decision, XYZ. And in that 7 days, we had obviously started to do our own research. The dog itself it had been standing in its own urine because its paws were urine scalded. It was super malnourished, smelled like feces, just every kind of element of neglect that you can think of this dog had. So we had information that this woman had more dogs because we got in contact with that animal rescue and they had said like this woman has other dogs in our care and we're concerned that she's had dogs that she said have died and we never really thought that that was true. So I can't remember every case detail per se. We had gotten a search warrant for their residence, and they weren't home at the time. So we were kind of doing a walk around the house, and there was a dog free roaming in the house, and it was this big pit bull, like super fat, super healthy, doing what pit bulls do, guard the house, being a good boy in that sense. But we had this information that this woman had more dogs, and we were looking around the house. We're like, there's no other dogs. There's this one dog that looks healthy. This doesn't make sense. And I was with another officer at the time, and we were kind of going around the side windows, looking, peering. And I don't remember if it was her or me, but one of us thought we heard something. So we kind of stood by the window for a second, and we thought we could hear this faint barking coming out of an area in the house. And we hadn't entered the house at that point because this dog was roaming around, but we had the search warrant. So we had full right to enter the house. So we had there was three of us. We had one officer deal with the dog while myself and the other officer entered the house. And in the basement, she had this door. And as we got closer, we obviously started hearing the dog noises. And we opened the door, and it was one of those barn style doors. The top half opened,
Mhm.
the bottom
Yeah.
half is closed. And in this dark cellared room were these two dogs in cages. And there were those wire cages, and the cage wires had been bent where their noses were sticking through. They had
Oh.
there was
Oh.
poop in the bowls, so like the water and food dishes, there was poop in it. The dogs were skin and bones. So we seized the dogs. There was also a puppy upstairs that they'd only had for it was only maybe 10 weeks old. It was in its urine soaked pee pads. And so we seized every animal on site. Long story short, the one dog, the charity had told us that person had told the charity that they euthanized that dog 6 months ago. So the charity was under the impression that the dog was euthanized and this person was just keeping it locked in their basement. The other dog they claimed wasn't their dog. It was just locked in the basement. And they had gone to the appeal court and only tried to get back the healthy dogs in the case. So it's like cases like that where you don't have a reason why, you don't understand why, there's no justification to it. But having that search warrant, we were able to go in and get those two other dogs because we had no idea that they were in there. We just kind of had a hunch and an inkling and some information from this local charity that she may have other dogs. But without that search warrant and without that judicial permission to enter this person's house, we never would have got those dogs. And who knows what would have happened. I
Yeah.
have suspicions that the dogs probably would have just died in their cages alone and malnourished. But
Wow.
yeah,
What's the purpose of her claiming that that dog is euthanized? Like, I don't understand why, like, she doesn't get anything from that.
that's one of the challenges of the job is you just don't know why.
Yeah.
You'll never know why unless they tell you, which they probably don't even know half the time why. And that's one of the ones that was a why for me for so long too also, and I still don't know, and I still don't even have I can't even make up a why in my head for that one.
Yeah.
It just yeah, it makes no sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, it
'cause,
just
like,
seems so I mean, I think animal abuse is irrational anyways, but like the fact that she showed that she was able to take care of a dog. So why
Mhm.
is she neglecting like two of the four? Like
Yeah.
that's
And that's sometimes you'd see that in other cases too, where certain dogs were neglected and others weren't. And again, this is just kind of what I think, but I'm pretty sure that happens with child abuse cases too, is a lot of the times one child is more neglected over the other. And it just kind of goes into the conversation of you don't know what's going on in someone else's head and mind and what they think about the situation versus what we think about the situation.
Mm-hmm.
But there's always going to be elements of why that you're just never going to get closure on.
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
So then in terms of like the search warrant, like how much time did it take between like the dog being dropped off and then it was like within 30 minutes you guys were at the animal hospital seizing the dog. You find out the information that the owner is said to have had more dogs possibly at home, and then a search warrant was obtained after that, and then you go to visit them. So like what would a timeline look like with that?
Again, this is like one of the challenging things with working for, I guess, a nonprofit or a law enforcement agency that's not the police is we were bound by our working hours and
Oh.
also the court's working hours. So it works a little bit different for police. So you can get a warrant either by walking in and speaking to a judge, or you can get something that's called a telewarrant, which is over the telephone. And I think those are more accessible because the police obviously can access a warrant anytime.
Mm-hmm.
So I think like, in our case, that was end of day.
Mm-hmm.
And because we had that one dog and everything else was just information that we had received. We didn't know for sure that there was another dog in that premise that was under distress. So I'm pretty sure it was the next day that we had applied for the warrant. And also, when you apply for a warrant, you have to state which date and which time you want access to that residence
Wow.
because you can't just go in at any day and any time. The judge needs to approve a certain date and a certain time, and you have to have reason why that date and that time. So I can't remember the like specific timelines.
Mm-hmm.
It would have been within 2 days because again, we
Okay.
also have to gather resources. So
Yep.
it's most likely the dog was day 1, the search warrant application and background information was day 2, and execution was day 3, which it getting the search warrant it can depend on which case. Like I had a case where it took me 2 to 3 months to gather enough information to obtain a search warrant.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, mommy does a good job.
Cornelius.
oh, I love Cornelius.
Awesome.
Barn cat.
So floofy.
So yeah, it depends on like the case, the element of distress, what you're looking at, what you're doing. We never had anything that we necessarily had to stay after hours to per se do for search warrant wise, but
Mhm.
yeah, I would say that's more typical of what we would experience is get the information, do your background research to write the ITO to apply for the search warrant, either take it to a judge and then you have to wait for the judge to approve it, or you do it over the phone via telewarrant. And that's not to say like you might get edits back on that search warrant and the judge wants you to change a couple things or clarify a couple things before they approve it, and then you have to send it again, get it back, and it was all through fax too, so it's like kind of, yeah, you're doing it in a super old fashioned way. You're dealing with the courts. There's a lot of elements to it.
So with that background information, what does that look like? Is it looking through stuff online? Is it looking through like previous records, animal hospital records?
All of that. It's so case by case, which is such an overused term in anything law enforcement wise, but it's so valid and so true. Is there's never
Yeah.
going to be a carbon copy incidence of what you need. So for that case, for example, we had, and this was a couple years ago, so I'm going to be missing some information, but we had the vet reports to use as evidence that this dog had a microchip to this. This is how we
Mm,
claimed it
mhm,
back to this person. The vet had that person's address on file because they were a client at that. So we had
mhm.
the location, we had an offense, and we had reason to believe that there was more animals in the location. But other cases are different. So I had a case where the the animals weren't in distress per se, but this individual had previously been charged with animal abuse and was given it's called a prohibition on owning animals. So she wasn't allowed to own animals for X amount of years. And she just happened to have a very open Facebook account. And we just
Of
happened to
course.
check up on it every now and then. And we had happened to realize that she had had animals. So she was a person who had it's no fixed address. So no one ever really knew where she was. She was constantly all over the place. So
Right.
that's a search warrant that took me a couple months to gather enough information. That was all through open source searches. So it was just pure investigation. It was very detective like. She had posted, for example, a mural of the local town she was in, and I recognized that mural. So I was able to locate, I knew what town she was in. And then she would post pictures on her porch, selfies, and I was able to see the shingle type on that door, the color of the house. And I was able to narrow down what the color house looks like. Another selfie was an angle where I was able to see that she lived on a corner lot. So it was elements like that where I was able to narrow down where she lived. And I'll never forget, we had enough information to know the kind of style house that we were looking for. So we had done a couple drive-bys, and my partner and I saw her on the porch and were able to obviously prove beyond a reasonable doubt that that's where she lives. So I had written the search warrant in two sections. Section A was proving that she had animals, which was the easy section to prove because she had posted Facebook posts on
Mhm.
it and whatnot. And the second section was proving where she lived because we had no fixed address. And again, to breach someone's charter of rights and freedoms by entering their home via search warrant, you have to be 110% sure that's where they live, and you have to prove to a judge that you're 110% sure that's where they lived. And because I was able to do that, we were granted the search warrant, and we went to her house, and it was like the best feeling ever because I'd basically been stalking her for the last 2 months. I knew everything about her. And
Yeah.
anytime she came at me with a question, I had the answer. And it was basically like, you can either give us the animals that we know you have, or we're entering the house and taking them ourselves because we have the search warrant to do so. So to go back to your initial question about what kind of goes into a search warrant, it depends. But at the end of the day, your ultimate goal is to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that what you're trying to achieve is there,
Yeah.
essentially.
Yeah.
That must have been so empowering just to be like, shut up. Give me the animals. I know what you're doing.
Yeah.
Give me the
Yeah.
animals.
It definitely
Yeah.
was. It was a good feeling. Like, not all search warrants were good feelings
Yeah.
because a lot of the times a lot of times you try and help the person as much as you can before you get to that part of search warrants.
Yeah.
Not every case is immediate distress. Not every case is you're going to walk in and find starving animals. A lot of the times you're working with this person for a very long time and they're either just not getting it or they're just not complying for whatever reason. So search warrants weren't always this grand parade of we're saving these animals. A lot of times it was more sad feelings than anything because it was like
Yeah.
you tried to help this person to help their animals and they just couldn't do it and they
Yes.
don't understand and now you're taking away their animals, which that to me was almost more sad than cases of just blatant neglect.
Yeah.
Because when it's just blatant neglect, the element of emotion is almost removed because you're able to put that stone wall up where it's like
Yeah.
you can't explain why you're just going in and saving the animals versus when you've worked with someone for maybe up to a couple months trying to help them help their animals and then the only way to resolve the distress is to take their animals away from them. It's hard because they often don't mean to do what they're doing
Mm-hmm.
or they just don't have the means to do what they're doing even with our help. So
Mm-hmm.
taking that bond away from a human and an animal is never a good feeling and you don't feel like the good guy all the time.
Yeah.
But like people often ask me how it must be a hard job emotionally and I can't speak for anybody else in that role, but for me, once I took the animal, that animal has a better trajectory
Yeah.
and I can deal with the person that did it to the animal versus if I didn't go in and save the animal, that animal is just going to keep going down.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
By going in and seeing the animal at the worst state, you know it's their worst state and it's just going to get better from there.
Yeah. Yeah. That's true. That's a good point of just like dealing with the humans who care about their animals but don't have the means to treat them properly is very difficult. Whereas if you're just going in and you're just like, no, you obviously don't care about your animals. I'm just going to take them away. You know, you're helping the animals versus like
Yeah.
just separating them,
And there's a
even though
lot
it
of
is helpful.
yeah. There's a lot of resources out there that we would give out too for people who is just a matter of money because we didn't go in to our day-to-day job wanting to take people's
Yeah.
animals.
That's
We
fair.
we want the animals to stay with the person because that's a bond that no one wants to rip away from anyone
Yeah.
and their animals. So even with resources sometimes it just never it just didn't work out unfortunately.
Yeah. So not every case was a cruel, scary, sad, like neglect. And it could
No.
just be a they're not in the right state of mind. This is not a
Yeah,
good
like
position for the animal.
we had one case that ended in search seizure warrant. I guess like search warrant slash seizure warrant is the appropriate term because you're seizing the animal under the warrant, but you
Hmm.
need the search warrant to go into the house to seize the animal. Is this individual just wouldn't buy flea medication for their animal because they believed that they could treat it naturally. And a flea infestation isn't a life or death situation.
Yeah.
But if you continue to let that animal suffer with the flea infestation, it does
Yeah.
turn into distress.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we had tried for, I think it was a month or two to just take, just all you needed to do was get a flea treatment. One
Yeah.
flea
Mhm.
treatment, you just need to do flea treatments for 6 months because the fleas will live in the house for 6 months. So you just need to do 6 months of continuous flea treatment and the situation is going to be resolved. Like it's not a serious element of distress, but she just wouldn't do that. So because the dog was in distress because it wasn't getting flea medication, we had to seize the animal, which is so silly and
Yeah.
to think about having to take someone's dog over flea medication. But this person just wasn't buying the flea medication and the dog had fleas and they were just getting worse. And dogs get I don't know if you know this, but dogs can get a flea allergy.
Oh.
Mm.
So that's when you see dogs with patches of fur missing and they're
Okay.
constantly scratching and then the skin gets inflamed and then they can get skin infections and it's just a carousel of issues that can occur from not treating your dog for fleas.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know that fleas can also give tapeworms. Like there's like a
Yeah.
whole myriad of issues.
Yeah. And that's why it's so important to not let your dogs have fleas, is
Yeah.
because it's not just fleas, it's what comes after the fleas
Yeah.
that can
Yeah.
snowball into a whole persona of issues. And that's unfortunately what happened with this case is we had to seize her dogs under a search warrant because they weren't treating their
Yeah.
dogs for fleas.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a time and a place for natural remedies, but there's some things that medication is definitely more
Yeah,
suited for.
and if it works, go for it. I'm
Mhm.
pretty
Yeah,
sure that first time that we visited their house, we were like, yeah, if we come back in a week or two and these fleas are gone because of your treatment, we'll be out of your hair. We don't care what you do, but you need to rid these fleas.
yeah.
And the natural stuff wasn't working and they just weren't
Yeah.
doing their due diligence.
So with that case specifically, like how I've got two questions. How does that come to your attention? And would the owner is the owner able to get their dog back after?
So we I think that was an anonymous tip that someone
Okay.
had submitted. And yeah, so the only way that they could get their dog back was appealing the seizure, which
Right.
anybody can do with anything that's seized from police, law enforcement, whatever. You can appeal
Mhm.
us taking your property because animals in the eyes of the law are elements of property. So this person did appeal our seizure, but like I kind of said earlier, when you appeal a seizure, you're appealing if the seizure was lawful. So
Right.
because we had gone through so many steps to help her and try and help her animals, it was and it wasn't like a simple one and done, like
Mhm.
you're not doing this our way, we're going to take your dogs. We had done everything in our ability to help her. She unfortunately for her, fortunately for the dogs, lost the appeal.
Mhm.
And then where I was at least, they got that once you've been charged with an offense or you've had your animal seized, you get put on a no adopt list so they can't adopt the animal.
That's good.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and I think in that case too, I didn't charge her. So anytime that we seized an animal, we had the option, officer discretion, if we wanted to charge that individual with permitting an animal to be in distress. And I didn't charge her because I don't think she did this in a
Yeah.
malicious way.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I didn't think that she would repeat that offense to that degree. I know that she had or this person had a lot going on in their own life and adding a charge wasn't going to necessarily help the dogs or help
Yeah.
her. I thought in this case, seizing the dogs was enough of a punishment to this person that that would be more than dragging them through the court process, adding
Yeah.
more onto the situation. And that's obviously officer discretion in case by case if you're going to charge an individual or not. And there's a lot that goes into deciding if you're going to charge someone, but in that case, I didn't charge her with permitting an animal to be in distress because I believe that taking her dogs was enough for her to understand what had gone on without adding more onto the situation.
Yeah.
Hmm. I have like two kind of follow-up questions on that then, because when you're like you just kind of said being seized with the no adopt, what happens then to seized animals if they don't appeal like you just said? So do they just go into an SPCA or a shelter for future adoption by other people?
Yeah, so the after an animal is seized, like I said, the animal has to be in distress, which means there's an element of medical that
Intervention, I
yeah.
guess.
So
Okay.
the SPCA will fix and treat the animal. And that's oftentimes when you see appeals in the media for donations is because there might be a big case that has come in that's taking a lot of resources. But yeah, once that animal is healthy, the animal will be put up for adoption and just
Okay.
adopted through the normal, typical ways.
Hmm. And then touching on the prohibition of owning, I think you had said, like, how is this insured? Because by the anecdote and the story that you had, it sounded like they just ended up having dogs anyways, like pets anyways after the prohibition. So is it something like you had mentioned, the no adopt list? So do shelters have this no adopt list that's shared throughout and with like animal hospitals?
There's
How does
no communication
Hmm.
between jurisdictions on no adopt lists, unfortunately. I remember bringing it up in discussion when I worked
Yeah.
for the agency, and I just don't think it went anywhere. So once someone is charged and convicted, the the most popular kind of retribution is a prohibition on owning animals, and it can depend
Hmm.
on how long. It
Hmm.
could go anywhere for, I saw typically like between 1 and 5 years.
Okay.
But just because they have a prohibition, it's so easy to access animals and to buy an
Yeah.
animal that the only real party that's going to know about this prohibition obviously is like the courts, the police, the public, and the jurisdiction in which the animal was seized.
I do find it so fascinating that there's no communication between jurisdictions in
Mm-hmm.
terms of like
Yeah.
this prohibition, because I'm like, if I'm given a no prohibition of owning, why not just go to the town over, buy a dog, buy a cat from
Yeah.
PetSmart, and just, or like from Marketplace or something
Yeah.
like that, right?
I had kind of taken that on as a passion project while I was there, but I don't remember why it never took off. I think it's just because it's so individually run across Canada. There's no
Yeah.
overhead per se.
But even like shared across the umbrella societies. Like
Yeah,
if SPCA Nova Scotia has a no own, well, let's share that with SPCA Ontario, Alberta,
yeah,
whatever. Like,
yeah.
Yeah.
not to
Yeah.
say that they're going to travel, but
They
make a
do.
Google Doc.
Yeah.
Share a Google Doc. Like, it's really so easy to share information, like
Yeah.
update it and keep it whatever formal. But
I even wanted a list available
yeah,
online that had it, but yeah,
yeah.
the
If
problem
that's
is like
public knowledge, though, is
yeah,
it not, right?
it is. The problem is being a nonprofit, they were just so strapped for time and resources that just like it just never
Mm.
took anywhere.
Hmm.
Which was a huge thing with, I can kind of go into one of the cases that's pretty popular and well known, which is Gail Benoit out of Nova Scotia.
I do know that case.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
actually, I'm interested to hear what you know about it, and then I can kind of tell you from my perspective about it.
It's been a while since I've actually heard anything specific about it. So I shouldn't say I know the case. I am aware of her name, and I
Yeah,
know that she was stealing dogs, correct?
that's the public perception. Yeah, yeah, is
Okay.
stealing dogs.
Okay, that's about all I know. So
So
Because what
I,
I would see of her is like when you were talking about the other person and how they were like so active on Facebook, is I was always see people posting on Facebook like, oh, I saw Gail today, like, oh, she's in this
yeah,
area, like
yeah,
protect your
I
dog,
remember
she's
that
gonna take
stuff.
them, like
yeah. So
that kind of stuff.
I don't really know why she was so everyone was so Facebook fixated on her.
Mm-hmm.
Like I understand why, but there's so many people out there, but she was just, I guess, one in particular just caught wind on social media. So Gail Benoit was initially convicted in 2009 after herself and her partner were convicted of 2 counts of animal cruelty for selling sick and malnourished puppies. So I know in the province that she was charged in, which is Nova Scotia, you're not allowed to sell any animal without a vet certificate, which just ensures the health and safety of the animals. And so after that, in 2013/2014, she was charged with fraud under 5,000 and identity fraud after she posed as Ashley to take 2 boxers for temporary care from a New Brunswick woman, and then she sold them. So I'm
Oh,
assuming that's where that rumor started.
Yeah.
dang.
Super valid because considering that she lied about her identity and stole someone's dogs and sold them.
Wow.
So as a result
Ballsy.
of her convictions, she was prohibited from buying, selling, or owning any domestic or wild animals. So from my experience where I worked, this was one of the most challenging elements of the job was the crime never seemed to match the punishment.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
And in most cases, even if you got a guilty plea or the courts decide this individual's guilty, the charge was never really more than a couple $100 fine and a prohibition on owning animals, which honestly, I didn't really exceed 5 years, which
Wow.
was really challenging. And I think that's
Mm-hmm.
what was probably one of the more challenging things for the public to understand with the Gail Benoit case is they see her with animals or they see her driving around and they just automatically assume that she was stealing dogs. But
Mhm.
I looked it up and I'm pretty sure her prohibition expired in, I think, 2022, 2021. I could be
Oh.
wrong on the date. So if someone's prohibition order expires and they're not charged with another offense, which is the purpose of the justice system, is to ensure
Yeah.
that you're not a repeat offender. So in theory, the justice system has done its job if someone doesn't get charged with another offense. However, that means that they can then own another
Yeah.
animal or a domestic or wild animal in this case. But I do see in 2016, she was then charged again with selling cats without a veterinary certificate. That seems to be the last time she has any charges on her. But yeah, I don't know why that one took off on social media as much as
Yeah.
it did in Nova Scotia. But that's just kind of an example of someone who was charged with a couple of offenses, pled guilty, but now can own animals again.
Right. Are there ever cases where they would get like jail time?
So I don't think so purely on animal cruelty charges. It would
Right.
more so have to be matched with something else. In 2014, so I did do some research about some high profile cases in Canada of animal cruelty. And in Alberta in 2014, 2015, there was over 200 dogs seized from an individual named April Irving living in Alberta. And the dogs were severely underweight, malnourished. Only one dog had access to food, no access to clean water, dehydrated, starving. Some of the dogs had open wounds, like kind of your worst case scenario when it comes to animal abuse. And so she ended up pleading guilty to 4 counts of causing an animal to be in distress. Taken, there was over 200 animals
Holy
Wow.
shit.
under the
Wow.
under Alberta's Animal Protection Act. And the Crown actually called it one of the largest animal cruelty cases in Canada's history. Again, that was
Yikes.
in 2015, but I don't think that anything to that magnitude or scale has happened since. Or
Which
if
is
it has, it
good.
just hasn't been publicized. Because I
Yeah.
do know that there have been a couple high profile cases in other provinces that happened since. I just don't know if it's gotten the media attention that this one might have had. So the punishment for the Irving case after pleading guilty to 4 cases of animal abuse was fines totaling $15,000
Oh, okay.
and a lifetime prohibition of owning or having custody of any dog in Alberta. Taken, because that's a provincial charge, that's Alberta. So in
Mm-hmm.
theory, you
Mm-hmm.
should go to a neighboring province and own animals and it not be an issue. So that's one of the biggest, I'd say, punishments Canada has given out. But like I said, that was one of the more challenging elements of that job. And also really hard on public perception too of the job
Mm-hmm.
is
Mm-hmm.
everyone is so, well, not everyone, but a lot of people are so passionate about animals and animal rights, as one should be. Like, we are the voices for animals.
Yeah.
And when someone does an animal wrong and doesn't get punished for it, it's not a good look, and it doesn't make you feel good as a person, and it doesn't make you feel good for what you're doing for animals. But unfortunately, that's kind of one of the stopping points of our justice system, is that in the scheme of cases and judicial backlog, it often gets pushed to the back burner and seen as not important as some of the other things that may be going on in the province. For example, I had a case once where we suspected this person was essentially laundering dogs and making money through dogs. And the courts basically, we charged her, and the courts basically said that this isn't important enough and it would take too much of our time and we're going to drop the charges.
Wow. Yeah, it's really upsetting that so many courts are so overrun with so many cases that they can't take on cases that should still go through. Like that person should
Yeah.
still have gotten charged
Yeah.
with something.
Yeah. And I think that's probably a theme that a lot of people in law enforcement unfortunately deal with. And it's probably not isolated to just animal cruelty or animal investigations, because we're never going to be ahead of bad people. We're always going to be 10 steps behind them. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, it's going to takes a lot of resources to deal with these things. So all that, again, it kind of goes back into the mindset that I had when dealing with abused animals is we've done the best that we can do at our level, and
Yeah.
once it's out of our hands, it's out of our hands, but knowing that we did what we could do to advocate for the animals in this situation is the mindset you have to walk away with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's fair.
Yeah, that's like any crime. Like there's only so many preventative measures that you can take. But people are still going to commit crime no matter the preventative measures. It's just kind of how society is. There's always going to be those people, as much as we don't want to admit that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's important that there's jobs like what you had out there to actually action when when the preventative measures don't work.
Yeah.
Yeah. I went to go look up Gail Benoit as you were telling us about it, just to find like, I don't know, her court case or whatever, because I had never heard of Gail Benoit. I know the two of you had, but it brought up another case touching on like charges that had been laid.
Mhm.
Very recently, March 2024, the SPCA received reports, and in 2025, in July of this year, a woman was charged 18 months imprisonment in the community.
Which province was that in?
It's Nova Scotia. So
Oh,
I don't
wow.
know.
wow.
Yeah. So I
For
don't
animal
know.
cruelty?
Yeah. So she has been sentenced to lifetime prohibition of having care, custody, or control of or residing in the same premises as an animal or bird. I guess they had to specify. And 18 months imprisonment in the community. So I don't know if that's like house arrest. I don't know if that's what, but for it to be worded as imprisonment.
No, that's
Yeah.
actually so important, because what that does is it implements case law.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if you've like talked about that on your podcast before, like the importance of case law.
We've had a couple cases in which there's been like a precedent set or
Yeah.
like, what was the one we just touched on?
Lacey Peterson.
Lacey. Yeah, Lacey and her son.
They created a law that if you harm or endanger a woman who's pregnant, you get charged with 2 counts for endangering her and the baby.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah. So that's like, so case law is so important because it's law that's created by the decisions of judges in courts. So having a animal cruelty conviction go that far, the reason why that would be so important in this, not just this case but future cases, is it sets that precedence that you can have a conviction that's
Yeah.
worth more than a prohibition or worth more than a fine, that there's other elements of punishment
Yeah.
that can be implemented. And what's so important in her case, which I see here, is she was charged under the Criminal Code of Canada. So that gives them more power to implement these punishments, as opposed to if she was just charged under the APA, the Animal Protection Act.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't know how it is. It's again province to province, but you'd have to be, I don't know if I'm using the correct terminology here, but I guess essentially sworn under the criminal code. Like you'd have to have those powers to charge in the criminal code. Not everybody would have those. Just because you can charge under the Animal Protection Act doesn't mean you're automatically able to charge under the criminal code. So that for example, that whoever it was at the Nova Scotia SPCA that charged this person would have had to have special criminal code ability to do that.
Yeah. So, like, that being said, is because I know there are like civilian arrests. Is that something similar in terms of civilian charges? Like you were saying, you had to be sworn in under the act.
Yeah. So we had, I guess, arrest authority,
Mm-hmm.
but we couldn't put someone in the back of our
Yeah.
SPCA van and take people in the dog carrier.
Yeah.
So what that means essentially is any time that you would, in theory, I guess, arrest someone is more
Mm-hmm.
so a, what's the right word I'm looking for?
Chain of command sort of thing.
Oh, like a paperwork thing.
Paper
There's a
trail?
word. No, there's a word I'm looking for.
Administration,
Yeah,
administrative.
yeah. So anytime at the SPCA that where I worked, at least, that you'd arrest someone, it was more so an administrative process. For
Right.
example, if you charge someone, you give them a court date.
Right.
Mhm.
As an officer, you're responsible for calling the court, seeing what days they're doing their
Oh
charges,
wow.
and giving that
Oh.
person a court date. If that person doesn't make their court date, just like any charge, they have a bench warrant issued on them. If you're in charge of executing that bench warrant, you have to arrest them in order to release them and give them a new
Hmm.
court order, a
Hmm.
new date for court.
Right.
So that was like the only time essentially that we'd be arresting people, is an administrative thing to give them a new court date to go stand on their charges.
Interesting.
So and in terms of like arrests and charges, then does that kind of apply to your officer roles in charging folks? Like I know before we started recording, you said you wore a stab-proof vest and you had
Yeah.
like you had a badge and everything. So like, is that the authority granted to you to say, "Hey, we're charging you with these things under the act"?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it was like you hand a paper. Is it
Yeah.
just a
When
okay?
you get, I guess, when you get charged with something, you're given a summons to appear.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So that's the legal paperwork that says you
Right.
have to appear on this date at this time for this reason, and the court also gets a copy of that, and the court
Okay.
does their thing on their end with their paperwork, and then that's essentially your ticket to court. Yeah. It's when you get a
Interesting.
traffic ticket, that's a summons to appear.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Same
Okay.
Oh.
Okay.
concept, yeah.
Following.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
When you get a traffic,
Interesting.
the only difference is when you get a traffic ticket, you have the option to pay. But if you choose that option to go to court, that's what that is. Because usually on a traffic ticket, you're given a date of court.
Yeah.
Same,
Uh-huh.
same concept.
Um,
That's neat.
Interesting.
one last question that I had, we can also take this out. But when you had mentioned like selling animals without a vet certificate, does this apply to pet stores too? Because I'm just thinking of like some of the conditions I've seen
Yeah.
fish and other kind of animals
Mm,
in these pet stores. Does this apply to fish? Does it apply to certain types of animals?
I do believe it's companion animals. I could be wrong. And again, it could be province
Oh,
to
okay.
province. Yeah, I
Interesting that there's that's
think,
like the specification too between a
yeah,
companion animal. Because even in that one case I just mentioned too, it them specifying like they can't, she can't own or reside as animals or birds. Like
yeah,
there was that
Yeah, that is
differentiation between the
interesting
two.
wording.
yeah. I'm
Yeah.
just, so it's defined under the Nova Scotia
Mm-hmm.
Animal Protection Act, or like the Alberta Animal Protection Act. It'll be
Mm-hmm.
defined as what an animal.
Oh, okay.
So because we were just talking about Alicia Hall and Gail Benoit, we're both from Nova Scotia.
Yeah.
It does say under the Nova Scotia Animal Protection Act, an animal means mammal, so dog, cat, livestock, birds, reptiles, amphibians, and fish. So fish do
Oh,
count. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
It does not
Interesting.
apply to wildlife. So it's just making that, I think it's just making that differential
yeah.
distinction between. And
Mhm.
Alberta the wording is slightly different for Alberta, but it's the same: mammals, birds, reptiles, amphibians, fish. But Alberta has other non-human species specified in their act.
Interesting.
Such
Oh.
a weird phrasing.
Oh.
I guess it just depends on how it's worded in the act, which was one of the things that you have to learn pretty quickly,
Yeah.
is how is something worded in an act.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And then how
Yeah,
do you
'cause
lawfully abide by that in
Yeah.
your day-to-day? Wow.
Yeah.
yeah, 'cause like laws and like acts are written in such like an overcomplicated way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah,
it
they're very
definitely feels like
technical.
there's room for interpretation and
Yeah. That also
flexibility in your understanding of it.
that kind of makes it fun though in a way, is how can you interpret something in a way that is lawful and legal but might be like it could be interpreted in a different way, if that makes sense. It
Yeah.
Yeah.
usually doesn't give too much wiggle room because like I said, case law is such a prevalent thing in Canada that oftentimes if you think of something there's already been a conviction on it that you can look the case law up and see
Mhm.
what happened. But it's always kind of fun to see how you can interpret something and how you can think about it in a different way.
Yeah,
Mhm.
exactly. Crazy.
So cool. I don't know if you guys saw too the forensic veterinary college courses that are being implemented.
No,
I
Ooh.
don't
that
know if
sounds
you've heard of
cool.
those. I can save it for a Forensic Friday if we want. I just felt it was kind of on theme with this episode.
That's kind of cool. I'd like to hear about it.
Okay. So, just briefly, there was a veterinarian in Ontario who's starting new programming at the University of Guelph's Ontario Veterinary College. And it has to do with forensic veterinary. So they've been rolling out a new forensic science program, and it's looking into basically identifying animals who have been abused and giving the veterinarians the tools to be able to make those determinations in their work. Because
Nice.
from what I've seen, like there's a quote, the estimate is about 90% of veterinarians will likely have seen that they perceive to be a case of animal cruelty or neglect within their practice lifetimes, but they don't have really the tools to identify or report this abuse or neglect. So it's kind of giving the additional tools to these vets to make better decision, not better, but more informed reports, I guess.
And
Or
side note, that case I talked about earlier wouldn't have come to fruition without that veterinary office
Mm-hmm.
making that call.
really, so
Yeah.
they had made the determination that yes, abuse was present. It wasn't just
Yeah. It wasn't
whatever.
just a stray dog. They had used their own reasonings.
Yeah.
She had given them a timeline that didn't make sense. The pause didn't make sense.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that the dog was so malnourished didn't make sense. So they had kind of put all those things together and made that call. But
Hmm.
it's not always going to be that obvious, which
Yeah.
is probably why that's such a good course to have, just as a
Mm-hmm.
background knowledge for someone to have in the back of their mind while they're treating animals, is what could this look like if I were to see it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No,
Because I
I agree.
wonder, like, to what extent vets can do something about animal abuse in the same way, like, what extent can a psychologist do
Yeah.
something about, like, child abuse or something like that?
Mhm.
Yeah, that poses some interesting questions in terms of like the legality of it all too, and because animals can't talk, right? So are you really overstepping? Are you hopefully you're doing what's right, obviously,
Yeah.
but
Well, it's a huge accusation. You don't want to just be
yeah,
throwing that around willy
yeah.
nilly. Yeah.
No, I agree. That's an excellent point. And just some stats from one of these is that I think you had briefly talked about it too at the beginning, Ellie, the fact that people who commit animal abuse are also not more likely, but it's common for them to commit other crimes. And so this is
Yeah.
saying homes with intimate partner violence, animal abuse is present in up to 70% of cases.
Yeah.
And pets are sometimes used as a means to control to prevent survivors from leaving dangerous situations.
Yeah. And I encountered that with one of my cases. Is that individual had admitted to the courts that they were a victim. It didn't
Wow.
it didn't impact the sentencing or the charges at all.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of shed light onto the case and also makes you think differently where it's maybe that individual wasn't the one committing the offense and
Yeah.
Mhm.
maybe it was the other individual in the situation who may have been the one controlling the outcome and placing blame in XYZ, and it's easy to speculate and put your own thoughts on the
Yeah.
situation, but it definitely
Yeah.
sheds a different light on a case when you have that when you find that out after the fact.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
definitely.
Um, okay, before we wrap up, I was wondering, because it's been kind of a not all doom and gloom, but what would you say was the most rewarding part of your time? I know we kind of touched on it and like being able to have that kind of only up from here for the animals, but did anything else stick out to you or things that you kind of took away from your time in that role?
That was it, is seeing the up and seeing
Yeah.
the outcome of the case.
Mm-hmm.
To me, like the when the animals would come and visit after the fact, it it wasn't like I wouldn't say it was like you got so much. Like for me, it wasn't necessarily like that was the most joyful part because like at that point you're seeing the animal in their most in the best place that they can be.
Mm-hmm.
It was more so seeing that turnaround point where you saw, I guess, the spark come back into their eyes
Mhm.
and you know that they're in a better place. Like, for example, my own cat was from a bad situation, but she was only a kitten. Like her eyes were still closed when she was with her mom. And the mom was from a hoarder's house, and seeing giving the mom that quiet space the day after the seizure, like it's even if it's just me putting my own emotion on the animal and maybe the animal doesn't care where it is or it doesn't
Yeah.
notice any difference, but to me taking an animal out of a super hectic, super dangerous, bad situation and just giving them their first night of like here's food, here's water, here's peace,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
was like the
Mm.
best thing for me is
Yeah.
knowing they have that now and
Mhm.
going from this to this.
Yeah.
Did you ever have animals come back and, like you said, they when they came back and visit, remember you, or like you get to obviously see that change from when you seized them to where they were now?
Not me, because you got to give credit to shelter staff in
Yeah.
these kind of situations. We're the ones that go in and take the animals, but the shelter staff are the ones that are taking care of the
Right.
animals, and the
Right.
shelter staff are the ones that are forming bonds with the animals and really are the biggest thing in turning that animal's
Yeah.
perception of life around. So I saw that bond kind of be highlighted, which was obviously amazing. And the shelter staff deserve that too, because they put in so much work into
Hmm.
rehabilitating these animals that doesn't always necessarily get highlighted or shown in situations.
Hmm.
But I think that does need to be spotlighted is the fact that animal shelter staff go through these emotions too. They
Yeah.
see the animals coming at their worst, and they're the ones that do all the work and are walking the dogs at I don't know whatever time they start 8 9 10 a.m. in the cold winter to ensure that they're getting their walks in and they're the ones who are feeding them and taking care of them and going through the ups and downs of their medical journeys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's a really
That's
good
cool.
point. That is a very good point. Um, any takeaways or wishes for listeners and pet owners to keep in mind from this?
Just love your animals
Yeah. Yeah.
and give them the best life and don't yell at them and don't be mean to them because they're just babies.
They
They're
just
just babies. They don't know any better.
No. And there's my one of my favorite quotes is it's like I might butcher it, but it's along the lines of you might only have this animal for a certain amount of time, but for that animal, you're its whole time.
Mhm.
Yeah.
In theory, fingers crossed.
Yeah.
But in theory, it's like that animal's life is your its whole life. So why not give it the best life it can? And they have such short lives, so why not make it the best one? And like we get jokingly get like, don't do that to the cats, but it's like
Mhm.
they don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're just being
Yeah.
goofy.
Yeah.
They're just being silly.
They're just living their best
Oh.
life, as they should.
As they
Mhm.
should, and they all deserve to
Exactly.
live the
Yeah.
best life that they can.
Yes.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm gonna go
No.
cry and pet my cats after this. So
Mhm. Yep.
they are both laying down on the couch, and yeah, no, knowing that quote, I've seen it in the past before, but I am a true cat mom now after a couple years in the bag. So to know, like, it just hits so much differently now,
Yeah.
as silly as it sounds, but
Yeah.
they
No.
do deserve the best.
Yeah. Love your animals. Don't take an animal if you're not going to love it.
Mhm.
Yeah,
They're a
Yes,
commitment.
absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah. You need to be prepared to
Mhm.
commit to it.
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
100%.
And I have
Okay,
thoughts
well,
on that. That's probably not professional.
go for it. We can cut it out.
Off the record, I don't think people should have animals unless they can afford the full
Yes.
extent of an animal, because I've just
Yeah.
seen it so many
Yeah.
times. It's just like, we can't afford it, and they're just disposable to someone.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
so
heartbreaking.
wrong. Yeah. If you
Yeah.
can't afford, it's like, if you can't afford to have the worst case scenario happen, or at least have resources in
Yeah.
place to be able to afford it, then
Yeah.
it's like having a kid. Don't have a kid, but I know that doesn't happen either.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, but the same sort of judgment call should be made for both scenarios.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
It's a
that's
living
very good
being
point.
you
Yeah.
share your house with.
Mhm.
Like, you need to dedicate the time, energy, money, and resources to it.
And even the
All
whole
the
like
same.
gifting puppies or whatever at Christmas
Yeah.
time, and then in the spring when they're no longer a puppy anymore, you're like, well, I don't want this. Like,
Yeah.
no, you
Yeah.
can't.
Like
That's not how it works.
Bob Barker always said, don't forget to spay and neuter your animals.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, that is
Spay and
so
neuter 'em.
important.
And the SPCA has a low income spay neuter program.
Yep.
So
Yes, they
There's
do.
resources
that.
out there.
There
Yeah.
are ways. Not to say get an animal when you can't afford it, but if you happen to have an animal and you are low income and you want to provide for this animal, there
Yeah.
are resources.
Yeah. And I
And-
do know certain shelters across Canada do offer food bank programs, and private charities offer food bank programs. So you're not a bad person if you can't afford your animal, and you're not a bad person for taking an animal you can't afford, because
Yeah.
we all have animals for different reasons.
Yeah.
But do reach out for resources if you need them, and don't be ashamed to do it, because you're only helping. It's not a matter of being ashamed that you need help. It's a matter of getting what's best for your animal in the time that's needed.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. You got to put your
Yeah.
pride aside.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%.
No, that's huge. And ethically source your animals.
Yes.
That too.
Yeah. Good point.
Feels weird to say, but it is very important.
And
Yeah.
I feel like I have an unpopular opinion on this, but like a lot of people have come to me and been like, should I adopt or should I buy? And I think that's such a personal decision.
Yeah.
When you adopt a dog, you don't know what you're getting. You don't know what the resources are like, where you're getting it. You don't know what's available. Like, if you walk into a shelter and find a dog that needs a home, that's great. That's not going to work for everybody. A lot of people don't know what it means to take a dog that's been from an abused home, or don't know what's coming in. And sometimes buying a dog from, like you said, an ethically sourced breeder is a better situation for you and your family and that dog than adopting a dog.
Mhm.
So there's often like there's this line where people get so, I guess it's like a controversial line of adopt versus buy. But
Mhm.
I believe it's what's best for you and what's best for the animal. Like, if you adopt a dog that's been adopted out 3 times because people can't handle it, and you just put that dog back in the system,
Yeah.
that's not good for the dog. And if you know that you can't handle those behavioral elements that come with adopting a dog that you don't know the history of, and you're
Yeah.
not willing to take that on, then maybe buying a dog as a puppy is a better option for you as a person. And I don't think you're wrong for doing that. And I don't think people should be labeled as bad for buying a puppy versus adopting a dog at a shelter.
Just
Mhm.
do your
100%.
research.
Yeah,
Like,
do your
do your
research and know what
research.
you're getting into.
Yeah.
Either way.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay.
absolutely.
Do the two of you have any other questions before we head out of this?
I don't think so. This has
No.
been really interesting.
Yeah, I feel like I've learned a
I-
lot, and like
I've
about
learned
things that I
so
didn't even
much.
know that you could learn about.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like that's
No.
just the surface too. Like if you guys have any personal questions, so you can always see me at work or message.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll have to
No.
have you back for like another episode and do like a
A
part
part
2 of
two.
more
Yeah.
in depth. Yeah.
Even if you wanted to, there's so many cases out there where it is crossed with like human and dog.
Yeah.
Even if you have a case like that you kind of just like want a different perspective on.
Mhm.
I guess I have one last question with you saying that before we hit into the outro, but do you find the large majority of the cases you come across are with dogs, or do you see cats just as frequently?
Dogs and cats.
Yeah.
I'd say like hmm, yeah, actually that's a hard one. I'd say dogs are the more egregious cases where you're getting, because cats are a lot more independent.
Yeah.
Cats can resource and find versus dogs are more dependent on their human.
Hmm.
So in that sense, I would say like probably more dogs, but not to rule out cats entirely. Like cats do
Yeah.
get neglected and abused, but it just looks a little bit different than it does with dogs.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
That's
No,
fair.
that's a good
That
point. Because
Mm.
like my kitten, or she's not a kitten, she's like 13. Um, she came from what we assume is an abusive household, and so kind of trying to like rehabilitate her into more like stereotypical kitten behaviors
Yeah.
has been an adventure.
Yeah.
But we knew that going
13
in.
years later, though, she's still, that little kitten in her's coming out every
She
once
is
in a while.
so nice to see. Like the cat we got in 2019 versus the cat in 2025 are two completely separate beings, and it's
And
so
doesn't that
nice
like
to see.
just make you feel so warm inside to know that she feels that she can be that way because she's in a loving,
Yeah.
caring, and appropriate home for her?
Yeah. The first time I picked her up and she like snuggled a little bit or like didn't push me away,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was like, I just about cried. I was like, this
Yeah.
is amazing. Like, this is just completely different from the cat that I first got.
Yeah.
Aw. Everyone go hug their pets tonight. Go tell them you love them. But thank you so much for joining us. I'm
Yeah,
really, really
thank you.
glad you took the time and made the time to come hang out and chat with us for almost an hour and a half now. But it's been really enlightening. It's been sad. It's been happy. I learned a lot. And like Journey said, a lot more than kind of we thought we were going to learn. And it still feels like you said it just scratched the surface. So if we have any questions that come up, we'll let you know. We'll open kind of it up for listeners too if they have any questions or comments, because I'm curious to see how many people knew of this position or this role in like this world of animal
Yeah.
cruelty officers.
And I just want to preface too, like this is my experience.
Yeah.
And
100%.
my knowledge, it's not going to be applicable to everybody's, and someone else might have a completely different perspective, and that's fine. Like that's part of anything in life. You're always going to have different perspectives on different roles, but that was how I viewed situations that I talked about, and that was my experience where I worked.
Mhm.
Don't be mean
Yeah.
to me.
No. We'll come fighting. We'll have our elbows up and swinging if people are mean. It's not allowed on this podcast. But all of that being said, again, 1,000 times thank you. We'll have another episode out in 2 weeks, as you guys have come to learn. Have it marked in your calendars. So you'll hear from us then. So, as every episode, you can find us on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, and TikTok at What the Forensics, our website, whattheforensics.ca, as well as our email, which is whattheforensics@gmail.com. And in addition, in terms of just this episode, it's going to vary province by province, state by state, but you can go to the SPCA's websites. I believe their emails are typically animals@spca provinceacronym.ca. So like animals@spcans.ca for Nova Scotia. You also have the spca.ca/report cruelty as an option. It may be province specific though. We'll have this all in our website too for quick links and quick actions, but there's also Humane Canada. It's the Federation of SPCAs and Humane Societies. We'll link that up. You can donate, you can report, and there's also the ASPCA where you can donate and report as well. So there are resources, there are options. Please, if you see something, say something. Be cognizant of your surroundings in your community. And like we kind of said, they don't have a voice. They're one of the most vulnerable populations, so we can be that voice for them. This has been another episode of What the Forensics. We hope you guys learned something new, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Bye!
Just a reminder to everyone that we are not professionals in the forensic science field. We are just interested in forensics and want to share what we are learning with our listeners. We're trying to give you the most accurate information, but we are human and can make mistakes. Thank you so much for listening, and we hope to see you next week.